So with Samsung gearing up for the firm's yearly smartphone launch, and with the benefit of hindsight, I think we'll sort of need the Galaxy S26 to at least make some notable improvements over its predecessor to kind of risk losing potential buyers. And I'm saying that as a Galaxy S25 Ultra owner and lover. But yeah, let's get into it. Let's get into some rumours. Let's get into some concerns in this video. If you want to see all the fallout though from the upcoming Samsung launch at Unpack, then hit subscribe as we'll have tons of things to dive into close to the time. And I'd love to have you as part of the team. Cheers. Let's be honest, for the past few generations, the Galaxy S Ultra lineup has kind of clung to the top of the Android totem pole. They haven't had a really big foothold. In many ways, I think it defies the lack of innovation and progression of the devices, just doing enough to maintain its status among the elite devices that you could go out and buy. That said, I do think a lot of Samsung fans out there have growing concerns that the company has kind of been pumping the brakes on the hardware. The last device that has really blown us away was actually quite recent. It was the Galaxy Z Fold 7. I think it did a lot more to improve what felt like a similarly stagnating foldable series last year. Surely though there's more to come this time around with the Galaxy S26. I think realistically there's no shame in sticking with the same design or sticking with the design language. And while we're not advocating for Samsung to shake things up too drastically here, personally, I've got to say I've got no qualms with the company sticking with what has made the Galaxy S series stand out, I guess, in a sea of crowded devices over the past few years. It is iconically Samsung, no matter how plain it may seem on the surface. But leaks have shown the smallest of refinements over the S25 ready for the Galaxy S26. Samsung, as I say, doesn't need to shake things up too drastically, visually, functionally. It's really disappointing to hear, though, that they are probably going to skip the magnetic key Qi2 compatibility without using a first-party or third-party case. I think that's a little bit of a whiff, and one of the problems that seems to persist with the company year over year, there's a feature or a function that we want, and Samsung drags their heels drastically with it. We know that Samsung does like to follow Apple's lead in lots of other areas. Think materials, finishes, and colour options. Sure, it's annoying, but it doesn't diminish too much, I think, from what the company can do when it actually sets its mind to making the best hardware possible. Think about it for a second there, though. You very rarely see hardware failure or component-related complaints with Samsung phones. I do think the company can make phones that do stand the test of time, so it's disappointing to see that they're probably going to omit this on this generation. I would say expect the best internals, that's kind of par for the course now. That means the best Qualcomm Snapdragon processor are available. What isn't clear is how Samsung plans to handle some functions like device memory allocation, with AI taking a front seat across the entire industry, and once again here on these devices, in both marketing and more broadly across the industry. The Galaxy S26 series is expected to stick with less RAM potentially than lots of its competitors, and that does include the Pixel series, which is not known for the best performance in the industry. One of the best features as well with the Galaxy S24 and S25 Ultra have been that anti-glare display. Samsung has already confirmed that a new privacy display is going to be a key component on their devices. For me, a higher maximum brightness would be a really nice upgrade, but I do think off-axis visibility to stop prying eyes, especially when you're in public transport, for instance, without a screen protector needing to be applied, it's a nice function, but I don't think it's a key seller by any stretch of the imagination. I think a lot of people would have preferred something like MagSafe or the equivalent. So yeah, it's a little bit like Samsung's not really putting their focus in the right areas, in my opinion. And as we look at the software stack, I think if One UI 8.5 is anything to go by, Samsung is taking some extra design cues from Apple once again. The problem here is that I do think this undoes some of the great work from the previous few updates. I think One UI 7 was fantastic, One UI 8 was great, One UI 8.5 kind of is a little bit disappointing because we get all of the trappings of one of the most comprehensive Android builds available, but for reasons unknown, every other OEM, including Samsung, wants to replicate clear glass elements to some extent, which is especially annoying, as I do think most people who look at the S26 series will do so probably because they don't want an iPhone or dislike what iOS offers. That includes me. Material 3 Expressive, I think, is really ripe for a Samsung take on it. It's one of the biggest problems that we have here on Android, and if the biggest brand associated with the platform isn't willing to take on Google's mantle, it's a crying shame, especially at a time when phones are starting to feel really samey, which the S26 no doubt will do due to various other factors that we discussed here in this video. Some of the early marketing for the Galaxy S26 and the Unpacked event hints at yet more AI and Galaxy AI, and I do think Gemini will be no doubt used as a key differentiator for the company. Is that going to be good enough though? And what will the S26 offer that, for instance, the Pixel 10 doesn't already offer or isn't already out there doing? Or are we going to see some parity with what Google is using to make its own phones, or let Samsung make its own phones better in terms of its AI functionality? I think that's probably where we're going to see the biggest changes here in terms of the software stack. A big concern though, as an S25 Ultra owner myself, and one that's used it for the past year or so alongside the Pixel 10, is just how Samsung is going to handle the S Pen this time around. We saw some functions dwindle, and we have seen functions dwindle over the past few years with a few key removals as one of the key selling points of the Note series, and then therefore the S series once it made the jump over here. It's become a little bit of one of those added extras that's kind of not as useful as these prior generations have progressed, either because it has been diminished or because Samsung hasn't developed it further to ensure that it remains a powerful tool that does set the Galaxy S26 Ultra apart from other devices and the S25 Ultra before that. No other brand offers an integrated stylus, and I think that could and should be something that is shouted about a little bit more. It could help sell devices to the professional out there, but it's kind of been left to rot, and I don't think it'll likely survive in the long term. So yeah, I'm excited, I'm trepid, I'm being a little bit concerned about what Samsung is going to do here. As I say, expect lots of AI shoehorned into One UI 8.5 or One UI, whatever they call this in the end, which I have to say, to me, isn't all that exciting. And arguably one of the biggest complaints levelled at Samsung Galaxy phones over the past couple of years has been another area of stagnation, is in terms of the camera upgrades or lack thereof. We've seen barely any changes of note from the Galaxy S23 right through to the S25 Ultra last year. The regular S22 to the S25 have also seen no changes, so that's even more disappointing over there. It's a little, I think they've done a little too much recycling for the brand, at least a brand that is at the top of the space. It doesn't really help that Samsung hasn't done enough to improve the camera software experience. The image processing is starting to become a little bit of a problem for many Samsung fans, myself included. Moving subjects still pose problems for the devices. Shutter lag is a major complaint for many of you. Image blur does ruin otherwise good photos on these phones, and it is just disappointing to see. I do think a bigger main sensor would be a major upgrade. I do think it's unlikely, but that would make Samsung a little bit more competitive in some of the insane, or at least competitive to the insane camera smartphones coming out of China in the past few years, especially if they have huge sensors packed inside. Yes, the camera is one of those areas that I do think Samsung needs to start putting more attention, because you can't rest on your laurels long enough in this game to stay relevant or make it the best camera experience that you can get on Android, as there are a lot of others out there who are really putting in a lot of effort to compete and go way beyond what Samsung can do right now. So we haven't talked about leaks too drastically in this video, because I think this is more of a, you can go and find them, they're pretty much par for the course at this point, but I'm probably wondering, will things change with this release? And I think as far as global sales go, it's almost a formality that the Galaxy S26 Ultra lineup will probably sell 10 times its nearest competitor in the Android space. Yes, it won't touch the likes of the iPhone, but I think this is where the company wants to at least try and make improvements in many areas to keep a grip or an iron grip of that sales figure. Samsung does appear a little bit lost as of late, especially over the last 18 months. Yes, there were signs that it would do good work, but yeah, making strange decisions here and there with seemingly no real plan to try and lead from the front. I think instead the company started to fall back on some old habits, taking more cues from Apple, as the well of ideas that they maybe had before looks a little bit drier than it has in the past. It is more frustrating because of how solid almost every Samsung Galaxy S series phone has been for a number of years, and that might be why they've started to get a little bit lazy, as it were. The Galaxy S25 Ultra in particular does belie its modest changes, or the modest changes from the S24 and the, in air quotes, upgrades that it did have. We're expecting more of the same with the Galaxy S26 lineup. While more of the same isn't a bad thing, that thing that they've had has been almost the same for 3 years in a row. Then it starts to become a bit of a problem, because you're just churning out the same thing over and over with the most minuscule of changes. For me, it makes it difficult to recommend to you, because there's almost zero reason for someone to upgrade now, especially if you have the S23 series. The experience is just not noticeably different enough, and that's why I'm a little bit concerned. And for the Galaxy S26 and the S26 Plus, there seems like there's going to be less of a reason to do so with those leaks out there. The severe lack of effort with those phones in particular is an absolute crying shame, and it showcases how little Samsung does care about anything other than the Ultra lineup nowadays, which is, again, feeling neglected on itself as of late as well. What do you think though? Let me know down in the comment sections below. Has Samsung dropped the ball in the last few years? I guess yes and no to some extent, which is, and I know it's a wishy-washy answer. I still use my S25 Ultra, which does contradict a lot of what I've actually said here because it is consistent enough. It's 8 out of 10 across the board, but I'd love to see a phone with 9 and 10s across every single area, which is something we haven't had for a little while. Doesn't mean I'm not excited for the sequel, but yeah, as I say, I'm a little bit concerned because it feels like another year of not much change and the same once again. Let me know, like I say, what you think down in the comment section below. Cheers for watching. Hopefully you've enjoyed this, and we will get into more of this once Unpacked comes along, hopefully in the next few weeks. Cheers.